Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
1230 WBZT. Well, you know there's a crisis in public education nowadays, and the fact that millions of people have taken their kids out of the schools and are homeschooling them using the internet and other technological tools that are available is proof of that. And I see what's going on here in Florida, in urban areas. These schools are just detention centers, effectively. Got an expert on to talk about it now. He's got a great website called eagnews.org. Kyle Olson is with us now. Kyle, welcome to the Financial Survival Network.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hey, so, Kyle, there is a crisis in education today. I don't think anybody could ignore it or deny it. Even Randy Weingarten, head of the largest teachers union in the United States, right?
Yeah, but, Randy tends to have her ear to the ground, and so she knows when the train is coming her way. And she's not the type that would just simply pretend like the train's not there. But you're right. I mean, people see in a variety of ways in terms of what's actually going on in the classroom, student proficiency rates, the fact that, we seem to spend more and more each year, and yet it's never enough. And the solution tends to be, at least what some people want, is we just need to spend more. And so there are a lot of problems that are facing schools, parents, students, taxpayers. And so what we try and do as an organization is, shine a light on some of those that not a lot of people talk about. And so, that's what we try and do, because, we view, if we are turning out kids who just simply are not prepared for life, they're not able to read, they're not able to, compute math, they're not able to do very basic things, how can we possibly expect them to hold a job and be an asset to society? That's not a reasonable expectation. And yet that is what is happening every single year. We're turning out kids that are not prepared, and we need to do something about it.
And Kyle, this has been going on for a long time. I mean, I think my generation, baby boomer, probably the last years of decent public education took place during my education. And after that, it looks like public education went into free fall. What the heck happened here? I don't understand it.
Well, I think what's happened is gradually the system has become more about what's in the best interest of the adults instead of what's in the best interest of children. I mean, one thing that we look at around the country is the role that collective bargaining plays. And it plays in the system and the impact that it has on, the education process. And you just look at the typical contract fight that takes place in the country, and it's about pay, it's about benefits, it's about work rules. It's a fight amongst the adults. And the kids, and what's in the best interest of children, will frequently be left behind. And so I think that is a major problem that has developed over the last several years, is that we have a system that looks out for the interests of the adults, the employees in the system, and not the children.
Well, you look at New York City, it's really disheartening there. They've got 1 million kids in this so-called public education system, and yet there was an article about a guy who was teaching typing. Now, this was 10 years ago. I don't know why they have a typing teacher anyway, but let's just assume that he was necessary. He was ogling and staring inappropriately at females in the class. They couldn't fire this guy. They brought him up on disciplinary charges a couple of times, so they put him in what they call a rubber room. Mm-hmm. In the rubber room, he got his law degree. He started a legal practice. He started a real estate business and acquired over $1 million worth of real estate and was running his law practice out of this rubber room. Finally, they paid him a whole bunch of money to not come in anymore and to retire. And this is the kind of thing that we're dealing with. It's insanity here, Kyle.
Right.
How did this happen? It's just nuts.
And that's precisely what I'm talking about. That whole concept of the rubber room, which basically would be almost like a holding pen for people who have accusations made against them, that was born out of the collective bargaining agreement. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. And so, and because the rules are very complicated and onerous, it makes the process of firing someone like that extremely expensive. And so, and the other thing is because of the makeup of the courts, the school district may not win. And so they make a business decision where they say, we'll continue paying this person, and then we will hire somebody new to take their place, versus going through the legal fight where we will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, which routinely happens, and then potentially lose. And there was, prior to Chris Christie's tenure reform in the state of New Jersey, there was a massive, very detailed process that a school district would have to go through in order to fire someone who had tenure. They would have to build the case. They would have to have evidence. They would have to have interviews with their colleagues and with students and with parents. There was this very thorough process that they would have to go to. And if they screwed up one step, they would have to go all the way back to the beginning. And we worked with someone from, I believe he was from the Patterson district in New Jersey, and made this chart to show all of these different steps. And it would take 4 years to fire somebody. And even then, going through all of that work, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, even then that may not have been good enough. And so that is the situation that we have in schools. And so I believe there are lots of good teachers in America in classrooms. There is a small percentage of teachers that are there for the wrong reasons. They are incompetent, they are abusive, they are not doing their job, and they should not be in the classroom. And the trouble is that the union rules protect those sorts of people. And it makes it very expensive, very time-consuming in order to remove those sorts of people from the classroom. And what that says to me is that the union is there to protect those sorts of people and not to do what's in the best interest of children.
Hey, in my own town in Westchester County, New York, and this was a case where the guy wasn't even in a union. He was an administrator, and he got into a tiff with the superintendent. And this was a case where he wasn't really even in the wrong. He said some things to another administrator who had been discharged, and that administrator had taped it. It got back to the superintendent, and the superintendent had a vendetta against this guy. So they suspended him and spent 3 years trying to get rid of this guy, and wrongfully so. He was a decent guy. He always got top-notch reviews. And in the meantime, when the guy was suspended, they had to hire another guy on a per diem basis for like several $100s a day. They go to court. They spent over $1 million on the replacement employee and the legal fees, and they lost. They had to pay this guy's legal fees. They had to pay him back pay and the replacement employee for naught. So, some of these protections might not be altogether bad, but what I guess I'm saying, Kyle, is how did the government become responsible for education? This maybe is not the best system to have the government responsible for educating our youth, because they're really not very good at doing anything. And as we've seen over the years, they've gotten bad at doing everything, especially doing education.
Right. I think Milton Friedman had a very good idea, and that was you have government's funding, but then you actually have government doing the work of education. And he said what should happen is those things should be separated. And you should have the government funding, but not the government actually doing it. And his solution was to create a voucher system or a tuition tax credit system where, in essence, the dollars would follow the child, and the parent could look at all of their options in their community, whether it's the government school or a public charter school or a private school or homeschooling or an online school, whatever it is. The parent looks at those options and they take the dollars that they paid in taxes that the government is providing or giving back to them, and let those dollars go to work for their child. That was his solution, and to me that makes so much sense, because the way we have operated for decades, generations in America, is that you go to a school in your community based on where you live, and nobody actually, stops to think about what is the teacher quality in that school. What is the culture between the administrators, the school leaders, and the teachers in that school? What is that working environment like? Is there a positive culture? Are they going to put the interests of my children first? That has never really entered into the equation. It's simply, you live on this street, so you're going to go to that school over there. And there has been this assumption that every school is quality, every teacher is quality, everything is good. But the reality is, you look at everyday life. Not everything is good. Not everything is equal. There are good stores and there are bad stores. Things are not equal, and schools are not equal. And we should allow kids to go to the school that best meets their needs. But instead, we don't do that. We have this zip code mentality where, because of where you live, you will go to this specific school, and that has got to change.
That is a great point. And the voucher system, which they've fought vehemently against every union. And then also the concept of reviews. How do the children do with specific teachers? God, the unions have fought that in New York and in LA, and they've tried to water it down, and the results there have been staggering. I want to talk more about teacher reviews and technology, internet-based learning, up next. On the Financial Survival Network, we're with Kyle Olson, 1230 WBZT. Thank you so much to Audible. We love Audible. I'll tell you a great story. It kind of saved a cross-country trip with my daughter and I. I was driving her out to Denver. She graduated from college. I told her, Britt, I'm not going to pay for you to party in New York. You have to find a job, and if you want to go to grad school later, we'll talk about it. But in the meantime, you got to get a job, and you have to do something. You're not getting paid to be in New York to party. So she got all huffy, and then she did some research, and she said, Denver, third best place in the country for recently graduated college students, new college grads. And she tells me she's going to move out. At first I was a little upset. It's your kid leaving the nest. You feel a little uptight about it, but I knew she made a good decision. She had thought it out. It was rational. So we're driving out there, and you know how it is with your kids. They're much smarter than you. They're quicker. They have so much more life experience, and they just know everything. And this led to some spats. So finally, after about 3 or 4 hours of driving, we weren't talking to each other anymore. So put on my iPhone, and I had downloaded the book, The Social Network, which is the story of Facebook about Mark Zuckerberg. And the movie was based on it. And we started listening to it, and she said, wow, I never listened to an audio book before. This is wonderful. I love it. And we started talking about the book, and we played it for about 8 or 9 hours of the trip, and it helped us patch things up. We totally got along well after the book, and it was just a wonderful experience. And the thing about audiobooks, yes, your imagination when you read, nothing can be better than that, let's face it. But when you're listening to an audiobook, you're getting a story told to you. It's a different experience than reading. Maybe it's not for everybody, but I think everybody should try it. So go to audiblepodcast.com/Lutz, audiblepodcast.com/Lutz. indoctrination.com/LUTZ. Sign up for a free 30-day trial, and you will get a free audiobook, and I highly recommend it. You got nothing to lose. It's totally enjoyable. It's one of those things every day or several times a week I look forward to playing, listening to, and you stay up on the latest books. The newest books are almost all published in audio format the day they're released. So if you're into Michael Connolly, David Baldacci, and a lot of others, Grisham, all those books wind up there. And the Grisham books are really have an incredible narrator. The latest guy, he's amazing. I think you'll enjoy it. So audiblepodcast.com/Lutz. It's been another Triple Lutz Report. Kerry Lutz signing off. Hey, we're back on the FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com. I'm Kerry Lutz. We're talking with Kyle Olson on 1230 WBZT. So, Kyle, what about these teacher reviews and school reviews? The unions fought these things tooth and nail. I think they've been watered down a bit, but they still are pretty instructive, aren't they? Did you look at the ones in L.A. and in New York?
Sure. I mean that's another issue that we are confronting as taxpayers and as a society is people in the private sector are regularly held accountable for their work. They go, depending on your place of work, you go through regular evaluations to look at, your strengths and your weaknesses and what you're doing right and what you could improve and all of those sorts of things. That's pretty typical in the private sector. But that's not been the way that it's worked in the public sector and specifically in schools for a variety of reasons. We just talked about tenure and the impact that has. Well, if you're a tenured teacher, it is extremely difficult to remove you from your job. And so I think what has happened is, depending on the contract, depending on the state, school districts have historically evaluated teachers, but they haven't really meant anything, because if you essentially have a job for life, what's the point of evaluating you? Because if you can't really be fired, then what's the point of going through that exercise and potentially offending the person or hurting their feelings or, whatever the case may be. And so evaluations have pretty much been meaningless for the last, many years. And now what schools are saying is, look, we believe, taxpayers and school boards and legislators believe teachers should be held accountable for their performance. And there's a variety of ways to do that. You can do that with how students do on a standardized test. You can base that on a variety of things. And some unions see that is the way that society is going, and so they're trying to drive the train versus derail it, because they see it's not going to be derailed. But then there are others who are just absolutely saying, oh, that's a corporate reform, and teachers shouldn't be held accountable for how their students perform, and that sort of thing. And so that's the fight that's going on. But it just seems like such common sense that we should reward effective teachers for the positive impact that they have on student learning, but then also teachers that are not doing the job, they should find something else to do, because not every person is cut out to be a teacher. And so those are the sorts of things that I think would help to improve educational outcomes for students, and those are the things that we should be focusing on.
Hey, just like not everybody's cut out to flip burgers in McDonald's, not everyone's cut out to be a CEO, not everyone's cut out to be a teacher, but if you can make it past that magic 3-year mark or 4-year mark, then you're a teacher for life, whether you should be or not, and what good is that?
That's exactly right. And see what happens is, I was not cut out to be a teacher. Most people were not, and a lot of us recognize that. But I believe, based on what we have seen around the country, that there are real solutions to improve education, improve the system. But see, what happens is when people like me say, well, this isn't working, it's obvious that this is not working. I mean, this is not just a personal opinion, but it's obvious this is not working. You're accused of hating teachers, hating public education, all of those sorts of things. And of course, that is the purpose of that is to get you to stop being critical, stop pointing out where there are problems. But, it's important, I think, for people like me and other parents and taxpayers around the country to say, look, this is not about you, as in the teacher and the school employees. This is not about you. This is about what is in the best interest of children. And there are certain principles that we believe in, like having a quality teacher in front of every classroom in America, allowing parents to have options and exercise their choice and let the dollars follow them. It's those sorts of things that we stand for that, of course, the bureaucracy, the union monopoly doesn't like. And so you mentioned earlier about unions fight vouchers. Well, they do that because it will decentralize the system and it will break up their monopoly, their unionized monopoly. And that's why they fight those sorts of things. And to me, it shows they don't have the student's best interest in mind or the parent's best interest in mind. They want to do what's in their best interest, and we see that play out every day.
And that's human nature too. And yeah, we see the DOJ suing the city of New Orleans, the education, the Department of Education, the Board of Ed in New Orleans. The voucher program, somehow it's discriminatory against lower income students, and it makes no sense there, because if anything, it's helping those students. It's proven that, look, in New York City, the parochial school system puts out far better students, graduates, proven fact, than the New York City public school system. There's no disputing it, and they're basically starting out with the same raw material as the New York City public schools, and yet they get far better results because they just don't allow behavioral issues to fester, and the accountability among the students, it's like you're either going to perform or that ruler is crashing down on your knuckles, right? The old cliche. And the public schools can't deal with that, the teachers.
Right. And I think there's an expectation that children will learn and children will achieve, and they do everything they can to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
And they know that school is not a social club. It's not a time to, play sports and do those sorts of things. School is a time to learn and improve your standing in life. And so when you graduate, you have options in life, whether you want to, go to college or go to the military or go to a trade school or something like that. That, to me, that's the whole point, is preparing kids for life so they have options. And they can choose what they want to do, and they can be an asset to society. But unfortunately, I think a lot of schools, that's not the focus. And so, that's why I think decentralizing the system, using free market forces to provide options for parents, to create more innovation, implementing more technology in the classroom, those are the solutions that will improve education for all students, and not just simply, tinkering at the edges of an education system that is so fundamentally broken academically and financially that just tinkering at the edges is not going to improve anything. And I think we need to get away from that mentality, and instead be focusing on revolutionizing the way that education is delivered to kids.
Hey, and two other issues that the union seem to fight with a vengeance. One is uniforms, and the other is same-sex schools. Okay, uniforms, proven fact that when the kids wear uniforms, performance goes up, and the other is that when males and females are isolated in their own schools, performance goes up. Am I crazy here? I mean, aren't these facts pretty much proven over time, and yet the unions can't seem to be able to deal with these facts?
Sure. Well, I think they view it as it's kind of standardizing the system and all of that sort of thing, which it's not. But I think a uniform, and I can see it both ways, I suppose, but ultimately what a uniform does is it takes away that distraction of what kids are wearing, and that sort of thing, and again puts the focus on education, learning something, and improving yourself. And so, the same thing with the same-sex schools. Now, parents may not want that. They may not like that. But I think that certainly is a viable option for parents, and if that's what they would like to do, then I think that's what they should be able to do.
Hey, if it adds 10 or 15 points to the scores and helps, to me, the clothing thing is out of control in these schools. And I know in my kids' schools and this upper middle class area, nonetheless, I would have preferred to see them in uniforms, and I would have preferred to see the sexes isolated, because that is a big distraction, especially when you start getting in middle school, upper middle school, and high school. And anything that focuses the attention on learning and takes it away from the social aspects, which school is to some extent, yes, socialization is important, but it should not be the focus of the educational experience. And I think you and I could spend days talking about these issues because they are important and they do permeate the entire system. But the educational system was designed originally for exactly that purpose, to educate the youth of today so that when they got through the system, they would become productive citizens. And if they chose to continue their education into higher education, they would be prepared and they wouldn't need remedial courses and additional preparation to go through college and university. And obviously it's failed in that primary mission.
Right. That's right. And so, yeah, what's interesting to me is, and I've been fascinated by this, we have been covering sporadically, or at least when the local news stories come up, these fights that we're seeing in communities about a dress code for teachers. And so, here we're talking about a dress code for students, but there are fights over a dress code for the teachers. And to me, that really shows how broken the system is. I mean, in West Virginia, we wrote about the school district was going to implement a dress code, and they didn't go and negotiate it with the union, which was their big mistake. And I'm only saying that partly sarcastically. But the union lawyer actually said that it was a violation of their individual and constitutional rights. He actually cited constitutional rights when the school district banned flip-flops, faded jeans. Pretty basic stuff that you would not necessarily expect to see in a professional environment. But the union was actually threatening to sue. In Little Rock, Arkansas, they actually had to put in writing, and I don't know why, but they actually had to put in writing that teachers are required to wear, quote, foundational garments, which you can probably figure out what that means.
Guess without too much imagination there.
But they actually have to put that in writing, and they actually fight about it.
Oh, God.
And that's the sort, it's ridiculous. And so, that, again, as we just talked about, I think that's why it shows, it's these sorts of examples show me that the system is fundamentally broken, and just tinkering at the edges, having a dress code for teachers, or reforming tenure, or these sorts of reforms are really not really going to do anything. It's going to take a radical departure from what we're currently doing, and changing that paradigm. And I think school choice and empowering parents with the funds that they have already paid into the system, giving those back to them in the form of a tuition tax credit or a voucher or something like that, that's the way to go.
Makes a lot of sense. Kyle, we've got to wrap up now. Just give us your website, where we find you, how we connect with you.
Sure. You can read everything that we write at eagnews.org.
eagnews.org. And of course, once this is posted on financialsurvivalnetwork.com, be a link to that site. Kyle, I want to thank you for coming on. You're going to be our resident educational expert. Sorry we didn't get a chance to talk about internet learning because that is revolutionary, and that really has the potential to shake up all levels of education, both from nursery school all the way up to postgraduate. It is shaking it up. It is revolutionizing it. Next time we have you on, we're going to focus on that because I think it's crucial.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, it's Kerry Lutz. I recently decided to move my retirement account into physical precious metals to hedge against the coming times. If you want to move an existing retirement account into physical precious metals that you can hold in your hand, tax-free, there's no company that can do it more quickly and efficiently than Regal Assets. It took them just 24 hours to open my new IRA account, and all I had to do was fill out one simple form. The best part is that Regal Assets does all the work for you. They cover the setup and administrative costs for 2013. If you're interested in making the same move I did, call 855-678-6620, 855-678-6620. That's 855-678-6620, or visit them at regalassets.com. You'll be glad you did, and tell them Kerry sent you.
The Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.